Welcome to Hospitality Folks, a podcast about the people behind great hospitality. I'm your host, Alicia Dick Wahlberg. Join me as we talk with hotel teams, managers, and operators about hiring, culture, and what it really takes to build teams that perform at high levels and stay. Hey folks, welcome back to Hospitality Folks. I'm your host, Alicia Dick Wahlberg. This week we're talking with Einars, a real estate investor building safari-based hospitality assets across Eastern Africa. He's the founder of Conserve Safari Camps Lodges, where he develops and operates high-end luxury properties in Tanzania. After a decade in finance and technology, he's relocated to Africa 2 years ago to build safari real estate as a distinct assets class, one designed to deliver strong returns, meaningful impacts, and direct access to extraordinary experiences. In this conversation, we'll dive into practical lessons from building real estates in frontier markets and aligning capital with purpose. We'll also dive into choosing a career path based on your passions and what you need rather than the expected path.
Thanks, Alicia. Pleasure to be here. Yeah, my name is Einars Garoza. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Conserve Safari Camps Lodges. And we build high-end boutique hotels inside African national parks. So right now we started with Tanzania. We have 2 properties inside the world-famous Serengeti National Park. And after that, we added our second property in Tarangire National Park. And we're looking to expand our footprint across safari accommodation and real estate.
Amazing. Now, before you started on this chapter, your background was actually in finance. Could you maybe talk a little bit about what your life looked like back then and how you found your way into safari hospitality?
Absolutely. Yeah. Back then, life was quite different. So I was back in Europe. It was mostly office work. So I was sitting at desk and doing a lot of number crunching. Microsoft Excel was my best friend. And so I studied finance and I started my career in finance. So I was initially managing funds for a family office. Then I spent quite a few years in corporate finance, managing cash flows, management accounting, financial accounting, dealing with big 4 auditors, shareholders, financial planning, etc., fundraising as well. And so I think that was a good part of my life. And then eventually kind of like I felt compelled actually by technology. So I took my finance job towards technology. I was building kind of like technology for finance teams for large enterprise and fast growing startups. And that actually introduced me to sustainability work. Eventually, I was building technology for finance and sustainability related startups, mostly the startups that were dealing with carbon credits. So a few years ago, they're very popular. Right now, they're a little bit out of fashion, but that eventually led us to kind of like for my family to get into carbon credit business. And so my wife was leading that business. She and her partner set up a carbon credit business in Uganda using bamboo plantations. They set up the largest intact bamboo plantation in whole East Africa. So that was the reason why we actually moved to Africa about 2 years ago. And so we landed in Uganda first, and then step by step, I discovered Tanzania. I discovered safari business and started looking into this. So coming from finance background, I wanted to also take a look on some numbers. And so we did some due diligence on the existing businesses that work in this ecosystem. And so the business seemed all right. And we thought that there's something unique and new or kind of like new perspective that we can bring to this market. And I think that was the reason why we decided to invest in safari properties around 2 years ago. So that was summer of 2024.
So it all started essentially from a bamboo farm.
Exactly. Bamboo farm deep into African countryside. I got my first malaria actually in that plantation. So we had an investor trip that was northern Uganda. And so I came back to the city, and in about 10 days, I gained fever. And funnily enough, that was exactly the night before I had to fly for the first time to Tanzania. And so it was so close that I even didn't come to Tanzania at all. And this kind of like the project and the business wouldn't exist whatsoever. It was so close.
That is terrifying to think.
It's actually not that bad. Yeah, malaria sounds worse than it is. Like the protocol is that if you get a temperature in Africa, you just have to run to the first place to get a blood test. And so you have to catch it early. If you miss it and you come as a tourist and you go home and you go to a general practitioner with the flu types of symptoms in Europe, they might treat it as flu, and that's a problem. Yeah. But in Africa, it's easily curable. I cured it in 3 days.
I'm so happy that you were okay and that you caught it right away and you were able to go to Tanzania. We could have a totally
Yes,
different
I
conversation.
had to postpone my flight for 3 days.
Yeah.
I was a bit tired, so that's why I'm saying it was so close that I didn't even go. But I thought that I had this feeling, I had this exciting feeling that I have to go there, I have to
Yeah.
explore, and so that was my first time when I came to Africa, or Tanzania, and actually got first touch point with this business. It grew from there pretty quickly. I think that was May. And then in July, we already started kind of like mobilizing capital and deploying. Then after that, in 10 months, we built 2 properties.
10 months.
In 10 months, yeah. You can
Wow, I cannot
set things
imagine.
up pretty quickly in Africa.
Yeah, I mean, one is funding, two is building the team in 10 months with 2 locations and from an area that you're not from.
Yes, so for every property, we hire around 20 people.
Okay.
And normally we start hiring as we approach kind of like the end of construction or kind of like the third quarter of the construction. And we usually hire like 20 people in 6 weeks, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah,
You must know exactly who you're looking for then.
yes. And so we initially kind of like how we did hiring was we took very European approach to hiring. We kind of like getting CVs, then we screened them. Then I had virtual interview. I had a big belief that it's a good filter if people can join Google Meets or whatever virtual call. And so we would have that. Then we would have online interview, and then we would have physical interview, etc. So kind of like a fully fledged hiring process. Eventually, like we thought that that doesn't serve us, and the time was limited, and we started inviting people at specified time, let's say Thursday, 9 a.m. in the morning. And we would invite like 15 people. And then me and my co-founder, we would just sit in 2 chairs and we would have third chair next to us. And we would just kind of like as a doctor call in the cabinet. Yeah, please next. And so we would have these short, quick interviews between, I don't know, 15 to 20 minutes. With great deal of accuracy, we could actually make decent hires. So that's how we kind of like set up initially.
Amazing. I absolutely love to dig into there. One thing I wanted to ask about is there must have been a moment where you thought to yourself, yes, I am 100% in. I'm fully going to do this. Do you remember what that moment was for you?
Yeah, I think that was actually before we fully mobilized capital for investing. So I think at that time I was coming out of like 3 years of, I wouldn't call it like existential crisis, but 3 years of transition from finance to something else. And I think I was personally looking for a change in life. And so I had like 3 years of feeling that something has ended, but the new thing hasn't started. There's even term for it. It's called liminal space. And so I think kind of like the moment I realized that this could grow legs, I really wanted this to work. And so I was just super excited and super kind of like thinking and let's call it manifesting. I was like very much manifesting. So this thing really works, come together very quickly and rather effortlessly. So I think that's one of the positive signs from this.
You and I, in our first conversation, we were talking about some ideas that people have as misunderstandings. And so I'm curious, when many Western guests arrive, they maybe have a very romantic idea of what safari hospitality is. What, in your opinion, do people usually misunderstand?
I think I think generally Africa breaks misconceptions pretty early when people come over. I think people generally feel that it's going to be worse. And so usually people, when they come on safari, they're surprised about the quality of the infrastructure and about the quality of people that they meet. And certainly there's inequality and there's divide in Africa. There are areas that are very poor. They're not necessarily unhappy people, but it's just they have less money and maybe less possessions. But generally, people that come over are very surprised about the quality that they see. The experiences are curated, hotels are very good, the service is good, cars are good. And then like, oh man, well, I didn't expect this. So I think that's one of the biggest things that people. The other one probably is safety and general sense of security. So I think people feel that before they come to Africa that it's a lot more dangerous, and then they come over and realize it's very peaceful actually. And so I feel safer here than in downtown New York metro station actually. And so we also moved to Uganda with 2 small kids, and so I think we generally feel very safe here, and that's one of the things that people realize when they come on a trip here as well.
I understand what you mean about the safety, but having those misunderstandings, I think it's really lovely that it's a happy misunderstanding once you arrive, that it's, I can take a breath, like it's okay.
Yeah.
Another thing I was curious about is when you're creating these guest experiences and it's so close to wildlife, what are some maybe responsibilities that come with that?
So there are certain rules that we abide to. So first of all, there are park rules, the things
Mm.
that you can do. But you can never get outside of the car inside the park. It's generally not in animals' nature to attack people. It's almost like they don't see people or they ignore people, and people you might see actual videos where kind of like they're lions just walking by the car or even jumping on the car, and so they do not attack people. But just to kind of like, it's very safe to be sorry. You should never get outside the car. And also, when you're in property setup in camps, when it gets darker, you're not allowed to move around by yourself. So we have walkie-talkie radios, and if you want to move between the room and the restaurant or the lounge, you have to call a dedicated security person who will assist you with movements. So kind of like having these precautions is something that we really pay attention to. A part of that is actually quite rigorous background processes when it comes to kind of like emergency situations and what you should do in case of fire, what you should do in case of some medical emergency. And so that is something that we have developed internally as well. And that is quite frankly also asked by our kind of like prime tour operator partners that deal with guests. And so that includes also getting insurance for airlifts. So that is also available if you get a medical emergency, you might get an airlift to Nairobi, which has the best medical system in the region. So there are quite a few things to make sure that kind of like the safety part is the
Mhm.
foundation for everything, and then comes the experience and enjoyment of the safari.
Absolutely. And coming back to the safety and at night. So for me, that is a fascinating idea. I mean, I walk out and the worst thing I'm going to see at night is maybe a fox, maybe a bat.
Yeah.
And I know you also welcome families. And that's one thing I'm very, as a mom with a small kid as well. What
Mhm.
does that look like for parents when they bring their children to your two locations? And I mean, especially what ages would you recommend they come with?
Yeah, and so usually we get very nervous parents in the beginning, so they're quite anxious how the trip is going to be with small kids. We usually pay a lot of attention to these kids, so they should not move around unattended. That is the rule number one. And if we observe that rule, generally the rest is fine. And so the parents leave very calm and they feel fine with kids. And we had guests that come with 4 kids on trips, the youngest ones being like 2 years old, like small toddlers. They're absolutely fine. So they spend the whole day in the safari car and then they take a rest in the camp as well. But sometimes guests get a little bit paranoid. So we had one guest who was sleeping in a room with the small baby. And then during the night, they heard some footsteps around the tent and even kind of like footsteps stepping on the platform. So we do like we set up tents on the platforms. And they thought, oh man, this is very dangerous. And so they were so scared that they didn't use the radio because they did not want to scare the animal with the noise. And so they thought if they would kind of like scare the animal would try to break in the tent. And so they had this very intimidating moment where they could not call for help, and they had a small toddler in the tent, and so they were super scared if the kid would also get scared and start crying, and that would also kind of like invite animal in. And so what we learned a lot from, so in the end everything was safe, so animals do not break into tents, but that is an example of how the experience can sometimes happen. And so we revised our briefing that saying that sometimes animals can kind of like even come and bump into your kind of like platform, or because they're trying to get fresh grass underneath the platform. And so in those situations, you should just take your radio and call the Maasai warrior guard who's going to come and check on you, because we have 2 guards staying up the whole night to make sure that everything is safe at the camp.
I can completely relate to that story. I went to Sweden a couple years ago when my son was little, and I was terrified of a moose attacking us while walking my dog. Not for my kid's safety, but because I thought something would happen because of our dog, and there was no one I could call to help if that
Yes.
happened.
But usually the perception of the situation is different from reality. And so,
Yes. And I think I love that you guys were able, you had this situation. Of course, everyone was safe, but it was just a simple thing of re educating the guest of what they can kind of expect and what you should do in those situations if they are fearful.
yes, and there is a lot of expectations management. So for instance, at the very same time when this happened with these guests, I was actually sleeping in the tent next to them. And so I did not hear those footsteps, but I heard from the restaurant in the night that bottles were clinking, like cling, cling, ding, ding, bottles clinking. And I thought that there might be a thief. Someone is stealing our bottles from the bar. And then eventually that was a honey badger that had broken in our restaurant tent, and he had smelled syrups that we use for the cocktails. And so he was looking for a few bottles of syrup. So kind of like, then it's on our team side to make sure that tents are properly sealed and they cannot break in, also for their safety, so that they don't eat any plastic, etc.
Absolutely. I love that it was a
Yeah,
honey badger.
honey badger. Yeah, that was good news that he was a honey badger instead of someone else.
Yeah.
But actually, do you know what's the most dangerous animal in safari for people?
Cow? A rhino?
A cow. We don't have many cows
Okay.
in safari, but that's a good knowledge test. No, we don't have cows in
Yeah.
safari. We have outside parks. Maasai people grow cows, and so they're big
Yeah.
cattle keepers. But in safari, the most dangerous animal is lone buffalo. So male buffalo that has been like segregated from other buffaloes, and so they're like hurt and they can be angry. It's almost like people, right? Grown up men that have been kicked out of their whatever group of people, they can
Mm.
be dangerous as well. So it's lone buffalo. So if you see one, just go backwards.
Turn around. Go back home.
Don't
Understand.
turn around. Just go backwards. Yeah,
Okay,
that's the
backwards.
idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And I know last time we were talking, you have a big focus now with your locations on wellness and through nature. What does wellness actually look like in one of your camps beyond just the buzzword wellness? Like what would someone expect with that?
Yes, full disclosure, that is still work in progress. So
Yeah.
right now we're focusing on safari experiences, but the projects that we have in pipeline is that we want to set up a dedicated tent or dedicated space for wellness events. And so that will mean basically you combine safari experience where you either do walking safari or driving safari and see the wildlife. We would combine that with dedicated content that actually helps you slow down, helps you unwind from the experiences that you had before coming on safari, and actually giving you tools and information and mindsets that you can discover something beyond just seeing wildlife. And so one of those realizations or one of the angles or ways how you can look at this whole experience is that you can look at nature and wildlife as a mirror. And so if you see something in the wildlife, a specific animal or a plant or an insect, there's a reason why you see that specific animal or kind of like this specific thing, because and then you can discover more about yourself indirectly. Kind of like you can ask question, okay, what did I notice? Why is this specific kind of like animal or insect talking to me? And so there's such a rich wildlife and such a rich experience here in Africa compared to what we have in the north. As you said, you might see some deer or some fox, and the moment you see it, it runs away. But here you can experience it close up. Then, especially when you have a very good experienced safari guide, it can tell you more about animals. You might see a herd of bachelor antelopes, and he might explain how they live. And you might see kind of like a batch of female antelopes with one male. And so one male basically serves the whole batch of females. And then this bachelor group is trying to prepare the strongest male who's going to contest and challenge the male that is with females. And so kind of like there's all these interesting ways of how animals behave and live that we actually can learn a little bit more about our nature. And I think that can serve as a powerful kind of like reminder or inspiration what this all is about. And kind of like, yeah, you can start kind of like pulling the thread and go down the rabbit hole and explore more about yourself.
Absolutely. I know a lot of your guests are coming from the US, from Canada, from Europe. What is something that you see in them when they first arrive that they're carrying, either mentally or emotionally? And how do you see that change by the end of their time with you?
That's a great question. I think generally people come a little bit anxious or kind of like more productivity oriented, that they
Mm,
want to just kind of like go through their itinerary. And Germans are very much like that. Germans would really, squeeze the juice out of safari, meaning that they would wake up every day at 6 a.m.
Ugh,
And be the first ones on safari and be the last ones coming back. But generally, I think like what changes with people is that they tend to relax more. They become more relaxed, kind of lean in the environment, spend a little bit more time, maybe kind of like sitting down after the safari, and kind of like I don't know, the faces become a little bit happier as well. So I think that's the power of nature here.
love that. Now, just to end with, if I were to come with my family, my son who's 4 and my husband, what would a typical trip maybe look like for us?
Yeah, sure. Since I think you're based in Germany, so you would probably board a plane somewhere
Yes.
in Frankfurt and fly to Kilimanjaro airport. And so you would, after a long flight, you will land in Kilimanjaro, just 2 hours away from Arusha, which is the safari hub. So you will be transferred there for a little bit of rest. So you spend 1 or 2 nights in Arusha and explore kind of like the African city. And then you would wake up, have breakfast, and drive with a safari car to Tarangire National Park, which is famous for elephants. There are huge herds of elephants and also baobab trees, but you can see pretty much any safari animal there besides rhino. And so you would go there, spend 1 or 2 days in Tarangire. You might do a night gate drive. So you would go out in the darkness during the night with a guide that has a torch, and he would kind of like show how safari looks like in the night. And then also you can do walking safari in Tarangire, which is very good. And so, for instance, one of our properties is located by a seasonal river. So there's a sandy riverbed. And when you do walking safari, you can actually see the footprints in sand. And so it's a very interesting exploration and conversation about which kind of animal has been here, where it has gone, etc. And then you spend 2 days in Tarangire, and then you drive to Ngorongoro Conservation Area, which is actually the #1 tourism safari attraction in Tanzania, which is a 2 million-year-old volcano crater. And all the safari animals, including rhinos, are inside a crater. It's a magical kind of like view. You drive like almost in a pot, and you all around you are a massive kind of like cliff because of this volcano. And so you would spend 1 or 2 nights there. Maybe on the way, you might explore also how banana is grown. You might explore how coffee is grown, how it's roasted, how it's prepared as a final product. You might meet also and visit local Maasai tribes. So spend a few hours with them, learn their customs, learn how they live. And then eventually you would go to Serengeti National Park, which is the world famous safari park. I think this year as well, they got an award for the best safari park in the world. And so it's famous for all the cats, lions, cheetahs, leopards, and of course all the other animals. And so you would spend 2-3 days there. Also go to hippo ponds. You would observe also the Great Migration. That is, sometimes it's called like an eighth wonder of the world. And so millions of wildebeests and zebras are moving around, following rain patterns. And then in July and August, they're crossing a Mara River in Serengeti North. And that's a very interesting and dramatic view. And so a lot of people come from that. And then you would board a plane, and either you would fly back to Arusha or Kilimanjaro Airport to go back home, or you might fly straight to Zanzibar. You might add some 4 or 5 days and spend time by the Indian Ocean, white sand beaches, which is gorgeous. Been like relaxed after safari experience.
It sounds amazing. I have a feeling after this goes live, my husband might be booking our tickets already.
Yeah, as we would say in Tanzania, karibu sana. Yeah, you're very welcome.
Yeah, thank you. And one final question, because I know my son is going to ask, what are your kids' favorite animal to see in the safari area?
Yeah, it's a funny thing actually. I think we spoke about this. Like I took my kids to Berlin Zoo before we
Yeah.
even moved to Africa, and I wanted to show them African animals, especially the elephant. And I think the best thing that they appreciated was the playground in the middle of the Berlin Zoo. But to be honest, I must confess, my kids haven't not yet been on safari here.
Oh, okay.
So I need to park this question. So
Okay.
that's definitely, I need to ask my kids. I'm very
Okay.
curious.
This will be a follow up. We'll do a
Yeah,
podcast next time in person together.
absolutely. Have you thought about your favorite safari animal?
It used to be giraffe, but I also really like hippos.
Yes, both of them are very lovely. I think my favorite one is the so-called Pumbaa, the warthog.
Oh,
That's my
yeah.
favorite animal. They're so cute. And they move around in families, like mom and dad and 2 or 3 piglets.
Yeah.
And it's just funny how they run. Yeah. When you see it, you will know.
You might convince me to switch over. It so sounds great. Thank you so much for your time. For anyone listening, where could people connect with you or find out more about what you're building?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. People can find us on our website, conservesafari.com, conservesafari.com. So that's our go-to website. And then people can reach me also on Instagram, which is Einars_Garoza. So just people can drop me a message there.
Right. And we'll put those links in the description as well for anyone who is looking to connect either for their next travel time or just to understand more about what it takes to rebuild your life with purpose and calling. We hope this episode gave you a bit of the wild to carry into your day. We're on a mission to redefine what a career path in hospitality looks like, and we want you to be part of the story. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe and share this story with someone in your team. It truly helps us build a community of intentional experts with a passion for hospitality. We'd love to keep this conversation going. Reach out to us, whether it's on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook. We genuinely want to hear how these stories are landing with you and what you would like to hear next.